Have you ever looked into a child's eyes and seen something that didn't belong there? Not sadness, not fear, but something darker, like they were carrying a secret so heavy, even their little bodies struggled to contain it? I need you to really sit with that image for a moment, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story, it's a puzzle with jagged pieces that refuse to fit neatly. And by the time you reach the end of this video, you'll have the exact answer you came here searching for. But to get there, you'll need to walk with me through every unsettling detail, every hesitation, every unspoken word that should have raised alarms sooner. If you're the kind of person who pays attention to the things people try to hide, this story was made for you. I want you to imagine this, a late afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Portland. You know the kind, where the trees are tall, the fences are white, and nothing ever really happens, or so people like to think. That illusion of safety is part of what makes stories like this one so disturbing. Because it didn't begin with a scream in the night, or a police siren blaring down the block. It began with something deceptively small. A child, my niece, clinging to the inside of my car door, refusing to go home. She was 9 years old. Her voice trembled when she asked me to let her stay the night. I thought she was being dramatic at first. I even laughed a little, nervously, trying to lighten the mood. But then she whispered, "Please, please don't take me back there." And my stomach turned cold. It wasn't what she said, it was the way she said it. Like her life depended on me listening this time. Before I take you deeper, I need you to know, this video isn't clickbait. It's not a spooky campfire tale made for background noise. This is the real account of what happened when I decided to listen to the voice most adults ignore, a child's quiet plea. By the end of this video, you'll understand what was hidden inside that backpack. You'll understand why she was so afraid. And you'll learn something about human behavior, how we miss the most obvious signs when they come wrapped in innocence. So if you think you can look away halfway through, don't. This isn't a story you'll want to hear in pieces. You need to feel every turn, every doubt, every moment. I asked myself, am I overreacting, or is something truly wrong here? Her name is Violet. She's my sister's daughter. Bright, creative, unusually mature for her age. The kind of kid who draws stories in the margins of her homework, always sketching people with their eyes closed. She said it made them look peaceful. I used to think that was sweet. Now I wonder if it meant something more. That day I picked her up from school was supposed to be routine. I was covering for my sister, who said she'd be stuck in a late meeting. When Violet climbed into the car, she didn't greet me the way she usually did. No, hey auntie. No smile. Just silence. And the way she sat, back straight, hands tight around the straps of her bag, like she was bracing herself for something. I made small talk, joked about getting her ice cream, even asked about the art project I knew she was proud of. She barely responded. Then, just before we pulled into her street, she said it. "I don't want to go home." Now, I know kids say stuff like that. They get into fights with their parents. They want to stretch sleepovers.
But there was something off this time.
Something in her voice that felt rehearsed but fragile. Like she'd practiced saying those words and was terrified I might not take them seriously. So, I did what any cautious adult might do. I drove around the block a few times, hoping she'd open up. And that's when she said the second thing that made my skin crawl. "If they find out I told, I'll be in trouble. Big trouble." That's the moment my mind split in two. One part of me, the responsible, rational adult, wanted to believe this was some misunderstanding. Maybe a disciplinary thing. Maybe she got grounded and was just overreacting. But the other part of me, the one that watches true crime shows and reads way too many articles about child psychology, felt a chill of recognition. That kind of fear doesn't come from being sent to your room. It comes from secrets. And secrets, I've learned, are often buried where no one dares to dig. I made a quick decision. I took her to my place. I told my sister there'd been a change of plans and that Violet would be spending the night with me. My sister didn't argue. In fact, she barely reacted. Just said, "Okay, no problem," and hung up quickly. That alone struck me as strange. No questions, no concern. What kind of mother doesn't ask why her child suddenly isn't coming home? Still, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Violet was safe for the night. That's all that mattered, at least, that's what I thought. But that illusion shattered when I went to do her laundry. I noticed she'd left her backpack in the hallway, half unzipped, like she'd rushed away from it. I know I shouldn't have looked inside. I know people say to respect a child's privacy. But something told me whatever she was afraid of, it was in that bag. And I was right. What I found inside didn't make sense at first. A crumpled notebook, pages torn, a small flashlight, a roll of electrical tape, and photographs. Several of them. Some printed, some drawn in pencil. But all of them deeply disturbing. Images of things no child should be seeing, let alone documenting. I can't show you the actual contents. Not here, not on YouTube, but I can describe what they meant. These weren't just random items. They were evidence. Clues. Pieces of a bigger picture Violet was trying to put together. She'd been watching something, recording it, hiding it. And whatever it was, it had terrified her into silence. This is where the story begins to twist. Because the more I learned, the more I realized this wasn't just about Violet. It wasn't just about my sister. It was about our family, about the people we trust, the ones who smile in public and hide things behind closed doors. It's about how easy it is to miss the signs of trauma when it's wrapped in routine, and how the truth doesn't just whisper. It begs to be heard if you're willing to listen. As the night went on, Violet started to talk, but only in fragments. She'd say things like, "They don't think I know," or "The basement's not always locked," and then retreat into silence again. I didn't push too hard. I knew better than to scare her off. But I started documenting everything, recording our conversations, photographing the contents of the bag, even saving her drawings. And the next morning, when I made the decision to take her to the police station, I knew there was no turning back. You don't walk into something like this halfway. You're either all in or you stay part of the silence. The detective who took our statement listened carefully. Too carefully. There were moments when his expression shifted, subtle. But there, a tightening of the jaw, a glance toward the mirrored window behind us. And then, without telling me exactly why, he asked if I'd be willing to let officers inspect my sister's home. He said, "There's something about this that needs to be confirmed." And just like that, everything I thought I knew about our family unraveled. They didn't just inspect the house. They brought ground-penetrating radar.
Dogs.
A full forensic team. The neighbors noticed. Whispers started. But it wasn't until they began excavating the backyard that I realized the horror of what we were about to uncover. Violet stood by the window that day, watching the officers dig. She didn't cry. She didn't ask questions. She just whispered one thing under her breath. "They'll find it now." And that's where I'm going to leave you for now. Because what the police did find beneath that yard was the missing piece of a puzzle that had been buried for years. It tied together every strange comment, every late-night phone call, every time my sister disappeared for hours without explanation. But before I reveal exactly what was unearthed and how it changed all of our lives, you need to understand the full scope of what Violet endured. You need to see the signs for yourself, walk the same path I did, and ask the same burning question I kept asking over and over. How long had this been going on, and how did no one else see it? So, if you've made it this far, stay with me. The answers are coming. But I promise you, what's buried beneath the surface is darker than you think. You stayed. That tells me something important. You're not just curious. You're invested now. Maybe because you've seen stories like this play out too close to home, or maybe because something in Violet's voice echoed in your own past. Whatever your reason, I need you to hold on to it because what comes next might make you question everything you thought you understood about family, safety, and the lies we all agree to pretend are harmless. You see, the moment the police started digging in my sister's backyard, it wasn't just the earth that began to break apart. It was the story I'd been telling myself for years. That we were normal. That nothing truly dangerous could live behind our doors. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes, they were the face of someone you've known your entire life. In the days leading up to that moment, nothing had seemed out of the ordinary. At least, not on the surface. I'd been busy with work, consumed by deadlines and late meetings, trying to balance a chaotic freelance writing career that barely paid enough to keep my apartment above water. I wasn't the kind of aunt who showed up to every school recital or weekend soccer game. But I loved Violet. I showed up in ways that mattered. Or at least I thought I did. Looking back now, I realize how many subtle signs I missed. Like how my sister, Lauren, had grown more withdrawn in recent months. Our phone calls were shorter, always cut off with some excuse about work or errands, or just being tired. Violet used to call me every few days, asking random questions or telling me about her favorite teachers. But recently, those calls had stopped. And every time I asked about her, Lauren gave me vague reassurances that everything was fine. "She's just growing up," she'd say. "She's moody. It's normal." And I believed her because I wanted to. Lauren and I weren't particularly close growing up. There was always a strange tension between us, like she was trying to prove something, even when no one was keeping score. She was the golden child for a while. Perfect grades, pretty smile, quiet demeanor. But behind closed doors, she was quick to anger, easily overwhelmed, always desperate for control. I chalked it up to pressure, to our strict upbringing, to the expectations that had been dumped on her shoulders since she was young. But over the years, I started to see cracks. Her relationships never lasted. She isolated herself. And when she had Violet, everything shifted. She became fiercely protective, almost paranoid. She didn't let anyone babysit. She installed cameras inside the house. She said it was for safety, but it always felt like overkill. And then there was Darren, Lauren's on-again, off-again boyfriend. Technically not Violet's father, though he played the role often enough. He came into their lives about 3 years ago, moved in after a few months of dating, and never really left, even when he and Lauren broke up. He was always around. The kind of man who smiled too big, laughed too loud, and touched people in a way that lingered half a second too long. I never liked him. There was something performative about his kindness, like he'd memorized how to look like a good guy. Violet never said much about him, but there was a time last year when she flinched, visibly, when he reached out to ruffle her hair. It lasted only a second, and when I asked her if something was wrong, she just smiled and said, "No, I'm fine." But kids are better at protecting adults than we are at protecting them. I see that now. After the police got involved, I started piecing things together, going back through old texts, photos, anything that might have hinted at what Violet had been trying to tell us. I noticed gaps. Pictures that used to show her grinning with missing teeth and messy hair suddenly became more staged, more forced. She stopped smiling with her eyes. In one video from last Christmas, she's sitting quietly while Darren hands out gifts, and when he leans over her, she shifts away, subtle, almost unnoticeable, unless you're looking for it. But now, with everything I knew, it stood out like a siren. Still, none of this was proof. None of it answered the central question: what was in that backpack, and why was she so afraid of going home? The notebook I found was filled with fragments, notes scribbled in a child's handwriting, some lines repeated over and over again. "They don't know I saw. Keep quiet. Don't forget the door code." And strangest of all, there was a drawing of a room, one I didn't recognize. It looked like a basement, with a locked cabinet and a figure standing near it. Violet had drawn herself in the corner, small and curled up, watching. That image haunted me. But what did it mean? Who was the figure? And what was behind that locked door? The detectives didn't give me much at first. They said they needed to investigate, that they had to be careful, that allegations involving minors required discretion. But I could feel the tension growing with every passing hour. Officers started coming and going at all hours. They questioned the neighbors, looked through trash bins, and brought in a specialist from child services. And still, Lauren insisted everything was fine. She told them Violet was going through a phase, accused me of brainwashing her, even hinted that I was projecting something from my own past. That's when I realized she wasn't just in denial.
She was hiding something.
And yet, just when I thought I understood the direction this was heading, another thread unraveled. A neighbor came forward, a quiet woman named Janine who lived 3 houses down. She said she'd seen something strange a few weeks back. Violet standing outside alone at 2 in the morning, staring at her house. When Janine stepped outside to ask what was wrong, Violet ran back inside without a word. The next day, Lauren told Janine not to get involved in family matters. At the time, Janine assumed it was just a parenting issue. But now, she wasn't so sure. She said Violet looked haunted that night. Like she wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. And here's where things started to fracture even further. Because Darren had an alibi, several of them, in fact. He worked overnight shifts at a local warehouse. Timestamp security footage confirmed he hadn't been home during many of the times Violet seemed most distressed. So, if it wasn't him, who was it? The easy answer was Darren, but suddenly, that answer didn't fit as neatly as it once had. And that's when my mind turned to someone I hadn't even considered, Lauren herself. Because the deeper I looked, the more inconsistencies I found in her behavior. Her social media was curated, perfect family moments, carefully timed posts. But behind those filtered photos were months of missed doctor's appointments, unexplained absences from school, and vague medical notes citing stress-induced symptoms in Violet. And yet, even that wasn't the full picture. Because when the police finally unsealed a locked chest in the basement, one Violet had drawn in her notebook, they didn't find weapons or tapes, or anything explicitly criminal. What they found was stranger. Dozens of small trinkets, old baby clothes, drawings from years earlier, and letters. Letters Violet had written to herself. Some of them dated back to when she was 6. And in every one, there was a theme. Asterisk, don't forget what happened. Asterisk, asterisk, don't let them pretend. Asterisk, asterisk, tell someone someday. Asterisk. It was a memory box, but not the kind anyone would want to keep. It was evidence of a child trying to remind herself of something she wasn't ready to say out loud. But what? That question kept circling, gnawing at the edge of every theory. Had Violet witnessed something she wasn't meant to see? Had someone threatened her into silence? Was there a secret even darker than abuse? Something so twisted it had been locked away, not just physically, but emotionally? And the more I asked questions, the more red flags I uncovered. An old neighbor remembered hearing shouting matches late at night, not between Lauren and Darren, but between Lauren and someone else. A man who didn't live there. Someone who came and went. Someone Violet might have recognized. And just like that, a new possibility surfaced, one that made everything far more complicated. What if the person Violet was afraid of wasn't living in that house at all? What if it was someone from the outside, someone Lauren had tried to shield her from and failed? But before I could explore that theory fully, the officers digging in the backyard finally stopped. And what they pulled from the dirt wasn't a body, but it was something that sent a ripple through the entire investigation. And I'll tell you what that was in the next part. You'd think that once the police found something buried, something hidden beneath years of silence and soil, everything would become clear. That the truth would rise like a flag on a battlefield and the villains would line up to be named. But that's not how it works, at least not in this story. Because what they pulled from the ground that day didn't offer answers. It raised more questions, and with every passing hour, it felt like the truth wasn't getting closer. It was slipping further away, tangled in secrets nobody wanted to explain. And just when I thought we were moving forward, everything began to unravel. Evidence went missing. People stopped talking. And I started to wonder if someone was deliberately trying to keep this buried, not just literally, but emotionally, legally, permanently. That's when the real fear set in, not of what happened, but of who was trying to make sure we'd never know. The officers found a rusted metal box. Old, dented, but carefully sealed. When they pried it open, it revealed something I wasn't prepared for. Tapes. Home videos. Not digital. VHS. And not just a Violet. These were older. Dated back over a decade. And most of them featured Lauren. Different house, different era, same haunted look in her eyes that I'd seen in Violet's just days earlier. That's when I realized this didn't start with Violet. Whatever this was, it had roots. Long, tangled ones. I tried to watch the tapes with one of the detectives, hoping to find something concrete. But after viewing just 2 of them, the lead investigator told me they'd be taken into evidence and reviewed by a specialist. I understood that. But then, something happened that made my heart drop. Less than 48 hours later, those tapes were gone. Officially, they were misplaced during evidence transfer. But I knew better. You don't just lose a box of potential abuse footage in a police department with surveillance cameras and documented chain of custody. Someone wanted those tapes gone. And if they were willing to risk erasing something that damning, I had to ask myself, what did those tapes show? And more importantly, who did they implicate? And that's when I got a message. No caller ID. Just a voicemail. A woman's voice, low and trembling. She didn't identify herself, but she said something that shook me. Stop asking questions. For your niece's sake. Some things aren't meant to come out. That was it. 10 seconds. Then silence. I played that message at least 50 times, trying to place the voice. It wasn't Lauren. It wasn't Janine. But it was familiar. The kind of familiarity that creeps up on you, not because you remember the person clearly, but because they've always been in the background, unnoticed. That realization scared me more than anything else. Because it meant someone close, someone I'd likely seen or spoken to, was watching me. And they knew I was getting too close. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not after what Violet had trusted me with. So I went back to the one place I hadn't yet searched, my childhood home. It had been empty for years, ever since our parents passed. But Lauren had the keys. And one rainy afternoon, after the tapes vanished, I found them buried in a drawer at her place, stuffed between old tax papers and expired warranties. I don't think she meant for me to find them. But once I had them, I drove straight there. The house was like a tomb, quiet, untouched, frozen in time. Dust over every surface, yellowed newspaper clippings stuck in the basement window. I didn't know what I was looking for, not exactly. But I kept thinking about those drawings Violet made, the locked cabinet, the hidden room. And then I remembered something from our childhood that had always seemed odd. The crawl space. It was under the back stairs. Our dad used to keep it locked, said it was just for tools. But even as kids, we knew he kept things there he didn't want anyone to find. And sure enough, the lock was still intact. Rusted, but holding. I forced it open with a crowbar from the shed and crawled inside, flashlight shaking in my hand. And what I found stopped me cold. A trunk. Another one. This one larger, and not rusted, newer. When I opened it, it was filled with letters.
Hundreds of them.
Some addressed to Lauren, others with no names at all. And each one was written in a shaky, erratic hand, our father's. He had written confessionals. Not formal ones, more like journal entries, letters to no one, documenting what he called the darkness that runs in the bloodline. He wrote about his father and his father before him, about controlling urges, disciplining properly, secrets no one could know. And between the lines, between the euphemisms and distorted self-justifications, I saw it for what it was: generational abuse. Not just physical, psychological, emotional, cyclical, passed down like an inheritance. And Lauren, she'd grown up in it, just like I had. Only I had escaped early, left home, blocked it all out, built a new life. But Lauren stayed. She carried it. And from what those letters suggested, she hadn't just been a victim. Somewhere along the way, she'd become a participant. That realization nearly broke me, because it meant the woman I was trying to protect Violet from might have been protecting her from someone else all along, or worse, continuing the cycle in ways she herself didn't fully understand. Trauma doesn't always look like a bruised face or a broken bone. Sometimes it's in silence, in rituals, in patterns you don't recognize until it's too late. And the more I looked back, the more I saw it. The way Lauren locked the pantry at night. The way she kept Violet on a rigid schedule. The way she panicked when anyone offered to take Violet overnight. Control disguised as care. But the twist didn't end there. Because the next day I got a knock on my door. It wasn't the police. It was Darren. And he looked different.
Pale.
Nervous. Like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't come in. He just stood on the porch, holding an envelope. I didn't know, he said, eyes darting behind me. Not until now. And if you don't stop, someone's going to get hurt. Maybe you. Then he handed me the envelope and walked away. Inside were photos, surveillance stills. Grainy, time-stamped. One of them showed me standing outside the police station. Another showed Violet at school. Another showed Lauren. But not at home. At a clinic. A private psychiatric clinic 2 towns over. Dated 3 months before all of this began. She had checked in under a different name. And just like that, everything I thought I understood collapsed. Because now the questions weren't just about who hurt Violet, but who was protecting whom. And from what? And as I stared at those photos, trying to make sense of it all, I heard Violet's voice in my head again. They don't think I know. But what if she did know? More than I ever imagined? And what if she wasn't the only one? That night, after Darren left, and I was left staring at those surveillance stills, I couldn't sleep. I kept running through every interaction, every memory I had of Lauren, of our childhood, of Violet's quiet warnings. It was like trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle while someone was actively stealing the pieces. I felt like I was drowning in shadows, and just when I thought it couldn't get any more confusing, my phone buzzed. It was a text from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Noah. He was my cousin on our father's side, the kind of relative who drifted in and out of family functions like smoke. Always charming, always detached. We'd never been close, mostly because my parents had whispered about him behind closed doors when I was growing up. They said he was troubled, unstable, someone who couldn't let things go. But now, out of nowhere, he was reaching out with a single message. *, we need to talk. They got to me too. *. I hadn't heard from Noah since our grandfather's funeral almost 10 years ago. Back then, he had shown up late, alone, and clearly shaken. I remember he sat in the very back of the church, didn't say a word to anyone, and left before the service ended. Later, I learned he'd accused our grandfather of things no one in the family wanted to discuss, things that sounded eerily similar to what our father had hinted at in those letters I'd found. But instead of investigating, the family closed ranks. They said Noah had a history of overreacting, that he was just trying to stir up drama. I believed them. I think we all did. Because it was easier than considering the alternative, that maybe he had been telling the truth all along. When I called him, his voice was strained, like he hadn't spoken to anyone in days. He told me he'd heard about the investigation into Lauren and had been following it from a distance. Then he said something that chilled me. "You're not the first to find a backpack." I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, breath caught in my throat, as he explained that years ago, his younger brother had done something similar, begged not to go home after a weekend away. Their mother found his backpack hidden under the bed, full of drawings, notes, strange items he wouldn't talk about. But before she could confront anyone about it, the backpack disappeared. She told Noah about it in a panic, but then she got scared. Stopped asking questions. The next week, she moved them across the country. And just like that, the whole thing was buried. Noah said he'd spent years trying to piece together what really happened, but every time he got close, people would shut him out, or worse, threaten him. It wasn't just paranoia. He forwarded me emails he'd kept, anonymous threats, vague warnings, even one message that referenced his high school locker combination, something only a close family member would have known. Suddenly, my voicemail warning didn't feel like an isolated scare tactic. It felt like part of a pattern. And the deeper we talked, the more we realized how much overlap there was between his story and mine. Same types of messages, same missing evidence, same eerie silences from people we once trusted. But then he told me something I hadn't expected at all. He had copies of 2 of the missing tapes. Not the ones from Lauren's house, the ones from our childhood. Apparently, he'd snuck them out of our grandfather's basement when he was a teenager, before the house was sold. He said he hadn't watched them in years, but after hearing about what happened with Violet, he'd gone back to them, and what he saw made him sick. I drove out to meet him that same night, cutting through empty highways and fog-thick backroads like I was trying to outrun the story itself. When I got to his apartment, tiny, cluttered, the kind of place where the blinds are always shut, he greeted me with eyes that looked like they hadn't seen daylight in months. We didn't waste time. He pulled out an old VHS player, dusted off the tapes, and popped one in. What we saw made my blood run cold. It was a family birthday party, balloons, cake, the whole scene. But there was something off. The way the camera lingered too long. The way certain faces froze when they noticed it was recording. And then there was Lauren, maybe 6 years old, staring straight into the lens, not blinking, not smiling, just staring, like she knew something terrible was about to happen. We turned the tape off before it even reached the halfway point. Not because we couldn't stomach it, because we knew someone else might already be looking for these. And that's when the second storyline collided with the first. Because when I got back home that night, the front door was cracked open. Nothing was taken. No signs of forced entry. But the backpack, the original one Violet had brought to my house, that was gone. Every scrap of paper, every drawing, every clue we had left. I checked the security cam I'd recently installed. The feed was wiped. Completely blank between the hours of 2 and 4 a.m. Whoever came, they knew exactly what they were doing. And worse, they'd been inside while I was gone. While I was watching a decades-old tape with a cousin I hadn't seen in years, someone had entered my home and stolen the very evidence I was protecting. It didn't feel random. It felt like a message. And just when I thought it couldn't spiral any further, I got a call from Violet's school. She hadn't shown up that morning. Lauren claimed she was sick. But when the school counselor called to check in, Lauren didn't answer. I tried calling too, no response. I drove to the house. No one answered the door. Lights off. Silence. And then I noticed something strange. One of the side windows, usually bolted shut, was open just a few inches. Enough for someone to slip out. Or in. I called the police. Again. But this time, something was different. The officer who came wasn't the usual one handling our case. He asked only a few questions, barely took notes, and seemed more interested in the house's property line than anything I had to say. I asked him why the lead detective wasn't assigned anymore, and he just shrugged. Reassignment, he said. Too close to the case. And that's when it hit me. They were scrubbing the investigation. One piece at a time. But here's the twist I didn't see coming. Not until I opened my mailbox later that evening. Inside was a single manila envelope. No return address. Inside, a single photo. Violet. But not from recently. It was taken at that same psychiatric clinic Lauren had secretly visited. Only this time, Violet was with her. And she wasn't just visiting. She was wearing a patient ID bracelet. And now, everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I was protecting her from, was flipped upside down. Because if Violet had been at that clinic, if she had been evaluated, treated, documented, then someone out there knew exactly what she'd been through. And they were keeping it quiet.
But why?
And more importantly, what did they think she was capable of? There's a moment, quiet, brief, almost forgettable, when your body realizes something before your brain catches up. A slight chill in the air when the windows are closed. The heaviness behind your eyes that's not from exhaustion. The way your phone feels too quiet, even though it hasn't buzzed in hours. That's how it started for me. A subtle shift. Not quite fear, not yet. But that uneasy sense that something was watching. And once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. It doesn't matter if you're in your own home or surrounded by people. It settles in your chest like a weight. And that night, as I sat in my dark living room with Violet's missing backpack burned into my thoughts and the envelope from the clinic still clutched in my hands, I realized I had crossed a line. This wasn't about investigating anymore. I was now part of the story, and someone didn't like that. The call came around 3:17 a.m. I remember the time exactly because I was staring at the blinking numbers on the microwave, trying to force my body to eat something, to do something normal. But the moment the phone lit up, unknown number again, I froze. I didn't answer right away. I just watched it ring. The name field was empty, but the screen flashed in a sickly green light that made me think of hospital walls. Finally, I picked up. I didn't speak, just listened. Silence. And then breathing. Not frantic or heavy. Controlled. Measured. The kind of breathing that lets you know the person on the other end is waiting for a reaction, for a mistake, for a crack in your voice. I was about to hang up when they finally spoke. Just one sentence. A man's voice this time. Cold.
Flat.
She's not who you think she is. Then a click. That was it. I stood there for a long time, phone still pressed to my ear, even though the line had gone dead. I kept thinking about the photo, the one of Violet in that clinic, wearing a patient ID bracelet. She had looked so small in that image. But not scared. Not even sad.
Just blank.
Like the lights were on, but no one was home. And for the first time since all this began, I felt something I didn't want to admit. Doubt. Not in her, but in what I thought I knew. Because if she had been in treatment, real treatment, why hadn't anyone told me? Why had Lauren lied? And why was every trace of her stay wiped from the public records when I searched for that clinic? It was as if the entire facility had been erased. I tried calling Lauren again. No answer. I called the school. They confirmed Violet hadn't returned. At this point, my nerves weren't just frayed. They were unraveling. I called the police station next, demanding to speak to the original detective who had taken our case. The receptionist paused, then told me Detective Kessler was on administrative leave. No further explanation. No timeline.
Just gone.
Another ghost in a story that was becoming less about truth and more about control. I knew what this was. Something, was pulling strings, cleaning up loose ends before the rest of the truth could surface. And I had the distinct, gut-level certainty that I was next. Later that morning, I went to meet Noah again. I needed answers. We agreed to meet at a public park this time, someplace open, somewhere I could see who was coming. But he didn't show. I waited 2 hours. Texted.
Called.
Nothing. His phone went straight to voicemail. That night, I drove to his apartment. The lights were off. His car was gone. Asked a neighbor if they'd seen him. They said 2 men in dark jackets came by earlier that afternoon. Suits, not cops. They knocked, waited, then let themselves in. No one's seen him since. And just like that, the only person who knew as much as I did, or maybe more, vanished. The fear hit me like a wave then. Not the creeping dread I'd been feeling before. This was panic. A raw, animal panic that made my skin itch and my vision narrow. I locked every door and window in my apartment. Pulled the blinds. Sat in the hallway with my back to the wall and my phone in my lap, refreshing news feeds, searching social media, trying to find anything, anything, that could tell me where Violet was. Where Lauren had gone. What the clinic was hiding. I even reached out to an old college friend who'd gone into journalism, hoping she might help me track down records that were suddenly missing from public access databases. She texted me a few hours later, said she'd started digging. And then nothing. No follow-up. Her last message was strange. Something's off. I'll explain in person. Can't text. Now I was spiraling. There were too many pieces missing. Too many coincidences stacking on top of one another. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this had stopped being about Violet the moment I opened that backpack. Maybe even before that. This wasn't about one child's fear. This was about a system of silence. A network. A pattern passed down like a legacy. Something buried so deep that unearthing it meant you didn't just expose the truth, you became a threat to it. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe Violet had been trying to do what I was doing now. That maybe the backpack wasn't just her cry for help, it was her warning. And I was too late to understand it. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jump. I kept the lights off, thinking maybe if I blended into the dark, I wouldn't be a target. I watched the hallway, the windows, waited for the noise of someone trying the doorknob. It never came, but I knew better now. They didn't need to break in. They'd already gotten in. Through fear. Through erasure. Through the manipulation of memories and silence, and just enough doubt to make you question your own sanity. I was losing track of time, of what day it was, of who I could even trust. Every face in my contacts list felt like a potential danger. Every place I'd once thought of as safe now looked like a trap. But the worst part, the part one can't shake, is that I still don't know who they are. I don't know if it's a person, or a family, or something institutional. I don't know if it started with our grandfather or Lauren or something even further back. And the more I try to find answers, the more the ground beneath my feet shifts. I keep remembering what that voicemail said. She's not who you think she is. Asterisk, and I keep asking myself, was that about Lauren? Or was it about Violet? And if it was, what exactly had she been trying to protect me from? It was just after 6 a.m. when the sky outside turned that soft, blue-gray that comes right before sunrise. The kind of light that doesn't comfort you, doesn't promise a new day, just reminds you how long you've been awake. I hadn't slept. Not even for a minute. The envelope from the clinic still sat on my kitchen table, unopened again after I'd read and reread it a dozen times, hoping something new would reveal itself. It didn't. Just clinical language, diagnostic codes, and a name, Violet. Nothing connected to Lauren. No mention of custody transfers. No flags or warnings or any of the things you'd expect if a child had been placed in some kind of psychological care. And that was the thing. The more I looked at the paper, the more I noticed what wasn't there. No contact info. No signature. No date. Just a sterile printout that felt more like a prop than a record. That's when I remembered something I'd missed. The day Violet ran to me and begged not to go home, she'd said something strange. Not just please don't make me go, but you don't know her. At the time, I thought she meant Lauren. But maybe she wasn't talking about her mother. Maybe she meant someone else. Maybe she meant herself. I went to my hall closet and pulled out the box of Violet's things, the few items Lauren had let her bring when she stayed with me last summer. Most of it was clothes, books, a stuffed fox she always kept by her bed. But beneath all that, buried under a layer of folded shirts, was a sketchbook I hadn't seen before. It was thick, the cover soft from wear, the pages warped in some places. At first glance, it looked like the usual stuff kids draw. Forests, animals, abstract faces, swirling shapes. But the further I flipped, the darker it got. Pages layered with deep, frantic pencil strokes. Scribbled notes in the margins, most of them nonsensical. Or so I thought. Then, on a page toward the back, something caught my eye. A drawing of a house. Not just any house. My house. And in the yard, 3 small figures. One of them looked like Violet. The second resembled me. And the third, I still don't know how to describe it. It was tall, shadowed, and it had no face. Only the outline of something watching from behind a tree. And beneath it, in jagged lettering, she'd written, "He knows who I am now." I froze. The breath just left my lungs. All this time, I thought Violet had been scared of Lauren. But what if she was scared of something else? Or someone else? Someone watching both of us. Someone who knew her in a way I didn't. That's when I heard it, my front door handle moving. Not turning, just jiggling gently like someone testing it from the other side. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the door, heart pounding so hard I thought I might collapse. But when I peeked through the peephole, there was no one there. Only an envelope, slid halfway under the door. This one was smaller, sealed with a piece of red tape. No name. No address. I tore it open, hands shaking. Inside was a single Polaroid, the kind you'd have to shake to develop. It was still forming. At first, all I saw was a gray haze. But then shapes emerged, and my stomach turned cold. It was a photo of Violet, but not a recent one. She looked younger, maybe 6 or 7, standing next to a woman I didn't recognize. Not Lauren. Not anyone I knew. The woman was holding her hand, smiling directly at the camera. But Violet wasn't smiling. She looked terrified. Behind them, in the blurry distance, I could just make out the sign of the clinic. The same one on the record I'd found. Only this time, someone had scratched out the name with black marker. That's when I got the text from Lauren. First contact in days. Her message was short. Asterisk, we need to talk. I didn't want you to know, but it's not just Violet. It's you too. I'll explain everything, but not over the phone. Asterisk, for a second, I just stood there, trying to make sense of it. It's you too. What did that mean? What did any of this mean? Then another message followed from a number I didn't recognize. Asterisk, don't meet her. She lied about the adoption. Asterisk, adoption? Violet wasn't adopted. Was she? She couldn't be. I remembered the day she was born. The photos in the hospital. The family visits. Or did I? I started flipping through my own photos, scrolling through years of memories on my phone. And that's when it hit me. There were no baby photos of Lauren pregnant. No images from her ultrasound. No photos of her holding Violet as a newborn. The earliest photo I had of Violet was when she was already 2 years old, walking, talking, with a vocabulary beyond her age. The puzzle started rearranging itself. What if Violet wasn't Lauren's biological daughter? What if that was the secret Lauren had been hiding all this time? And what if the clinic wasn't a hospital, but something else entirely? A place where children were placed, or reprogrammed, or re-identified. A place where pasts could be rewritten? Suddenly, everything made sense in the worst way. The blank look in Violet's eyes. Her drawings. Her fear. Her refusal to go home. The envelope. The disappearing witnesses. And now, this proof that I hadn't just been chasing a family secret. I was caught in the middle of something far bigger. Something designed to stay hidden. Something that involved me. Because if Lauren had lied about Violet, what else had she lied about? And why did I suddenly get the feeling that I was never supposed to find out who Violet really was, because if I did, I might have to face the truth about myself too. That's when the last text came in. No number. Just words. Asterisk. The next time you look in the mirror, ask yourself, how much of your past do you really remember? Asterisk. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't sure I could answer that. The old highway stretched for miles, empty and fading into the dusk like something half erased from a memory. I'd driven this way before, years ago, but it didn't feel the same anymore. Nothing did. The GPS was useless now. The location Lauren gave me didn't exist on any map. All I had were her final words. Asterisk, you'll understand when you get there. Everything started at the lake house. Asterisk, I didn't even know we had a lake house. But Violet's drawings had shown it. The sketch with the faceless man. The trees. The water. It was all there, hidden in the folds of her notebook like a coded message I was only just beginning to translate. The gravel crackled beneath my tires as I finally pulled up to a clearing. The house stood alone, gray and worn, partially hidden behind towering pines. It looked abandoned, windows dark, porch sagging slightly, but the door was open, swaying in the wind. My hands trembled as I stepped out of the car, clutching Violet's sketchbook like a shield. Every step toward that house felt like a descent into something irreversible. The air grew still. Even the insects had gone quiet. Inside, the house was colder than outside. The smell of dust and damp wood filled the air. Faded family photos lined the walls, except none of the faces were familiar. I moved through the room slowly, every floorboard groaning beneath my weight, until I saw her. Lauren, sitting at the edge of a fireplace, clutching something in her lap. Her hair was tangled, her eyes hollow like she hadn't slept in days. When she looked up, I saw tears, but not the kind that fall from guilt. These were the kind that come from someone who's finally stopped pretending. I didn't know how else to protect her, she whispered. They were going to take her back. I had no choice. Back where? I demanded. And who's they? She didn't answer at first. Instead, she reached into her coat and handed me a USB drive. It's all here. The real adoption files. The experimental therapy logs. The facilities footage. They were reconditioning children. Not just foster kids, children who had seen too much. Children they claimed were unstable. But Violet wasn't unstable. She remembered. She knew what they'd done to her. The words landed like punches, one after another. Reconditioning? Footage? What did that even mean? Then she dropped the final blow. She's not my daughter. And neither are you my brother. The room spun. My mouth went dry. What? She stood slowly, pacing like a trapped animal. You were part of the same program years ago. You were older. They wiped your memory, changed your identity, gave you a new backstory. You were supposed to live a normal life. But something went wrong. You started remembering things you weren't supposed to. And when Violet came into our lives, when she started drawing him, I knew the process had failed for her too. That's why she kept running. She wasn't scared of me. She was scared of being taken back. My body went numb. Every flashback I'd had, Every dream. Every unexplained déjà vu. The missing childhood memories. They weren't random. They were redacted. Lauren reached for a framed photo on the mantel and turned it around. I recognized my face immediately, but younger. 10, maybe 11. Standing beside another child. Violet. The caption on the back read, Test Group B, Recovery Cycle #3. My knees buckled. What did they do to us? Lauren walked toward a closet and pulled the door open. Inside, a wall of monitors blinked to life, hidden surveillance footage from rooms I recognized. My kitchen. Violet's room. Even this house. Everything had been monitored. Every word, every call, every moment. And in the center monitor, I saw something I hadn't noticed before, footage of a figure watching us from the trees. Not Lauren. Not me. Someone else.
Tall.
Faceless. Always just at the edge of the frame. They called him the regulator, Lauren said. He wasn't real. At least not to most people. But for the kids who didn't respond to the treatments, he became real in their minds. A shadow. A threat. And when they finally removed the children from the program, they made sure the regulator stayed with them, just enough to keep them afraid of remembering. I stared at the footage. The figure wasn't just watching. It was directing things, moving objects, setting things in motion, always one step ahead. And then something on the screen changed. The feed from my house, the one I thought was live, shifted. It wasn't a live feed. It was a loop. I hadn't left my house hours ago. I'd left days ago. I had no idea how long I'd really been gone. Suddenly, there was a noise outside. A low hum. Lights through the trees. Lauren's face went pale. They found us. She handed me the drive.
Take this. Run.
Don't come back for me. Don't trust anyone, not even the authorities. They're part of it. That clinic? It was shut down years ago. Burned. But someone rebuilt the program. Someone with resources. I hesitated. Come with me. But she shook her head. If I do, they'll track you through me. Violet's your only chance to break the cycle. Keep her away from them. No more hiding. No more lies. I turned to leave, but before I could take a step, the door slammed shut. And from the shadows behind me, a figure emerged. Not a shadow. Not a hallucination. Flesh and blood. The regulator. Only he wasn't a myth. He wasn't imaginary. He was my father. Or, at least, he once was. The truth came crashing down in one final, unbearable wave. This wasn't just about Violet.
This was about me.
And I was never supposed to wake up. I don't remember how I escaped the lake house. I don't remember running or hiding or crossing state lines. All I remember is waking up 2 days later in a cheap motel room off Route 7, the USB drive still clutched in my hand, bruises lining my ribs, and a pain behind my eyes that made everything blur. Violet was asleep beside me, curled into a blanket she must have dragged from the car, breathing steadily like nothing had happened. Like she didn't just witness the last veil of our lives get ripped away. For a long time, I just watched her, because in that moment, she was the only thing that felt real. Not the footage. Not the memories. Not even my own face in the cracked bathroom mirror. Just her.
Alive. Safe. Free for now.
The files on the USB were bigger than I expected. They weren't just therapy logs or old reports. They were blueprints. Maps of the facility. Psychological profiles. Unapproved research. Lists of names. Children who'd vanished. Therapists who'd been silenced. Caseworkers who were later declared missing or presumed dead. It wasn't just a rogue program. It was a multi-tiered operation cloaked in non-profit jargon and sealed court documents. I sent the entire folder to every journalist and whistleblower platform I could find, people who wouldn't be scared into silence. I didn't expect them to believe me. I just wanted the truth out there, even if it took years for someone to finally piece it together. But what I didn't realize until later was that the real story wasn't in the files. It was in Violet's drawings. Each one had been a map, a memory she couldn't speak out loud but needed someone to understand. The swing set in the woods, the faceless man, the locked red door with the number 13. Those weren't symbols. They were coordinates. The door, as it turned out, wasn't just part of a hallucination. It led to a sublevel of the original building, one they had sealed after a supposed fire. But the foundation still stood, hidden under years of overgrowth and a fake land transfer registered under a shell company. It took me weeks to find it, and by the time I did, all that remained were scattered medical files, restraints on rusted cots, and the distinct, inescapable sense that we were never supposed to return. Someone had been there before me. Someone had torched most of what was left. But they missed one drawer, stuck behind a scorched file cabinet. Inside it, I found an old photo, a child with a familiar face, standing in front of a government seal. The child was me. And behind me in the corner stood the regulator. Not as a myth, but as a handler. A real person. Real power. And beside him, Lauren. She wasn't my sister. She never had been. She was my assigned caretaker. The one meant to guide my reintegration into society. To monitor my stability. Somewhere along the way, she'd grown too close. Tried to shield me. And when she saw the same instability in Violet, when she saw the same eyes, the same drawings, she realized the program had failed again. That's when she started running. Not from guilt, but from inevitability. I didn't know if she survived the lake house that night. The fire made the news, but no bodies were found. Just an abandoned property and whispers of squatters. But I still check every burner account, every encrypted message board, every article posted under initials and pseudonyms. I like to think she's out there, watching, making sure we stay hidden. Violet doesn't talk about the regulator anymore. Her drawings have changed, brighter, more grounded. She paints sunrises, not shadows. Animals, not threats. Sometimes I wonder if she truly forgot, or if she's just learned how to carry it differently.
Kids do that.
They adapt in ways we never can. I enrolled her in a small school in a quiet town under new names. No digital footprint, no photos. I work nights at a truck stop and we keep to ourselves. She's made a friend who lives next door, and I see her laugh now. Not the forced kind, but the real thing. It's small, fragile piece. But it's ours. As for me, I still dream. Of that house. Of red doors. Of children whispering in the dark. Some nights I wake up gasping, not sure if I'm back in the facility or just stuck in the memory of it. And every so often, when I walk Violet to school, I swear I see someone watching from across the street. A figure just beyond the trees. Faceless. Still. But when I blink, they're gone. Maybe it's trauma. Maybe it's something else. I don't know anymore. I've stopped trying to make sense of it all. Sometimes survival isn't about answers. Sometimes it's just about staying ahead of the past. But here's the thing, if you're watching this, if you found this story, then it means the truth has already begun to surface.
Someone wanted it out there.
And you were meant to see it. So, remember Violet. Remember the sketchbook. Remember the girl who begged not to go home, because she was the only one brave enough to tell the truth when the rest of us had forgotten how. And if you ever see a child staring at the edge of the woods, whispering to someone who isn't there, don't turn away. Don't assume it's just imagination. Because I once did that too. And by the time I realized what I was seeing, it was already too late.